Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's the author of Mafia Confessions, King of the Bootleggers, Murder, which is a 100% true crime story from the personal diary of Giuseppe Joseph Parisi. He grew up in West Springfield, Massachusetts, but is now in Southern California. Let's welcome in Nick Parisi. Nick, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tommy, how you doing?
I am doing well. Excited to have you on. I enjoyed the book. Listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes to the book where you can get your hands on it. It's a very good read. But let's start here, Nick. Who had the diary or who found it?
One of my cousins had the diary. He's one of the Giuseppe's grandsons. And I didn't get the diary until the book was almost finished.
Really?
So that was a nice little treat to get at the end. And I got it just in time, and I rewrote the book with the diary included.
Nice. Well, I can say this much. Giuseppe was a very good writer from what that diary showed.
You know, he was a very intelligent man. It's pretty impressive, you know, how intelligent he was.
Did you have to go back and then research everything to document what was in the diary?
No, because it basically confirmed what I already wrote. You know, I had hundreds of newspaper articles and interviews with reporters. I had court documents. I had a lot of different documentation, and his diary it just met everything up perfectly. So it really just confirmed everything.
Was this story then in your family forever, or when did you first learn about this story?
Well, I've always known about the story. It's a huge story, and it's a huge story in our town. But I started doing some genealogy work just on the Parisi family, and there was just so much newspaper stuff about, Giuseppe Parisi and my grandfather, all my uncles, my aunts, my grandmother, the whole Parisi family was involved in bootlegging back then. And there's just so much there. I just really started getting into it and doing some more research on what happened during Prohibition. And I came across a Mafia genealogist. That's actually the name of his podcast. And he actually did a documentary about the other family. And when he did the documentary, first of all, he's not from Springfield. He's from New York. He doesn't even know how to pronounce the names of the people in our town, but he started slandering the Parisi name, just really painting us in a bad way. And really, it was a really biased documentary they did on this whole murder. And it really upset me. I actually went on his podcast recently, and I told him he was the inspiration. I told him, you pissed me off. You really pissed me off when you wrote that stuff about the Parisi family. And it's what made me want to write the book, get the story out there right.
What were your thoughts then when you actually got the diary and started going through it and reading it?
It wasn't really the whole criminal part about the book. It's the stories about how he met his wife. It's his stories about the interactions with the family, how happy, and he was in tears that his father and his sisters were coming over from Italy, and he went out and bought furniture and got a nice apartment ready for them. How he followed his future wife, home from work every day, trying to get her attention. And, he even got, beat up by her brothers, and he just insisted on, this is going to be my wife one day. And just that part of it was just so incredible to hear. And, I put it in the book, and my book's really geared towards, it's men our age that like the whole mob genre. But when I put that in the book, women are telling me they just love that part of the book. It just makes them so likable. And when you read the book, I've had ex-police officers that I golf with and people that are prosecutors, and they told me they found themselves rooting for Giuseppe to win the trial. because he was looking at the death sentence.
Yeah.
He was looking at the electric chair, and they found themselves rooting for him because he became so likable from his diaries.
Yeah.
So I just made the book. It changed the book from what it was.
Let's start getting into it. The Italians were chased out of Italy. Why were they pushed out of their own country?
Well, I don't know if they're really chased out of it. Fascism and all that was already, run out of there. It was more a mass emigration back then. You had some major events happen. You had a major earthquake that destroyed the Calabria and Sicily. From the earthquake, you had a tsunami. I don't want to say the number. It was in the tens of thousands of people died during this earthquake. Now, back then, Calabria was kind of cut off from the rest of Italy by a huge mountain range. So everything north of Calabria was, it's kind of like Rome. It's people with money and jobs. Then you go over the mountain and you're in Calabria, and it was really peasants back then. It was all poor farmers. You had the 'Ndrangheta, which was kind of like the Sicilian mafia, but it's the mafia of Calabria, kind of like the Camorra of Naples. And they were really, just extorting everybody and, kidnapping people and all kinds of crime. But there was no work. There was no work at all. So I think the number was something like 40% or something like that of the Italian population within 20 years left Italy. During that whole earthquake and all that, loss of work and just terrible conditions during the late 1800s, early 1900s.
In 1900, in southern Italy, peasants would sleep with their revolvers, but this was also the knife and slash time as well. Explain what life was like in those days in Calabria, Italy.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the politicians back then, they were using the mafia, the 'Ndrangheta back then to sway people to vote for them. Everybody was, they're carrying razors and switchblades back then. It was the Black Hand. People were getting kidnapped and held ransom from their families. It was just a dangerous time. Just reading about even, Springfield, Massachusetts back in the early 1900s. I don't think we would have survived back then. They were slicing police.
Mm-hmm.
It was being a cop was not, it was a dangerous job back then. The Italians and, all the ethnic groups that came over, not just the Italians, the Irish had some tough gangs back then in our area. And it was a dangerous time. And yeah, people were quick to pull a knife back then or pull a gun back then. It didn't take much. That's how a lot of feuds were settled quickly back then.
Giuseppe left for America at age 17 by himself on May 18th, 1911, and arrived on May 30th in New York City. And listeners, you may be going, age 17. Now think about this. You send your 17-year-old son to America by himself. That's going to take him 12 days to 2 weeks to get to America. But that's what happened back then, right, Nick?
That's how it worked. And, he did have a sister that came over first and a brother, but, they were in Massachusetts, they were spread out in Massachusetts, and I forget how much money he had in his pocket, but it was probably equivalent to like $50 today. And, a suitcase and $50 in your pocket to get on a boat as a 17-year-old going to another country. You don't know how to speak the language yet. And just here you go. It's better in America that, they told the Italians that the roads were all, paved in gold in America. But, they didn't tell the Italians that, well, first of all, they're not paved in gold. They're actually dirt. And second of all, you guys are going to be the ones paving them, and not for much money. And I think Giuseppe made $1.50 a week for 58 hours of work a week.
January 16th, 1920, Prohibition went into effect until December 5th of 1933. So basically almost 13 years. Carlo Siniscalchi, who was the king of the bootleggers in Springfield, Massachusetts, was driven out of New York in 1912. he was thought of as aggressive and malicious. A reporter by the name of James McPhee stated his reputation was rotten. Nick, explain why Carlo was driven out of New York.
Well, you had the Italian squad. I'm not sure if you ever heard of them. It was a tough group of police officers in New York City. They were all Italian, and their only job was to get rid of the Black Hand. It wasn't called the Mafia yet. It was called the Black Hand. They were a bunch of, basically kidnappers. And they would grab little kids and hold them ransom, or grab rich businessmen and hold them ransom. So they had this Italian squad of really tough Italians, and they went after the mob. And Siniscalchi was part of that Black Hand. He was from Naples. That's the Camorra, which is the Napolitan mafia, and he was involved in the Black Hand. So he was run out by the Italian squad, very famous group of Italian policemen, detectives. They wrote a book about them. It's pretty interesting.
There was a feud between Springfield and West Springfield Italians. Giuseppe was the head of West Springfield. How bitter was this feud just between West and Springfield?
Well, it was huge, and it's what laid the groundwork. What's even happening today. Everybody wanted a piece of the bootlegging action. You're talking about poor immigrants from Italy that are making $1.50 a week. And now you can make, $1,000 a day. That's like $50,000 a day today. And, just by, selling some alcohol to your friends, opening up a speakeasy, having a secret room in your house, or, like Giuseppe, he had Parisi's market at the end of my street where I grew up. And back then, you go down the basement, it was a full bar. So it was just easy money, for all the ethnic groups. Every ethnic group was doing it. Mm-hmm. And it was just easy money. The only people against it were the hardline purists, basically the people that came over on the Mayflower, that established Springfield, Mass in the 1600s. But all the ethnic groups, they wanted their alcohol and they weren't giving it up. And it created a big opportunity. And Prohibition created the Mafia in America. Probably would not be here if it wasn't for Prohibition.
There was a beef between Siniscalchi and Giuseppe, basically that involved bootlegging. Carlo double crosses him and he puts a hit out on Giuseppe. And then Giuseppe shot and killed him over $750 and being scared for his life. Giuseppe was said to be a member of the Camorra Mafia, but that's actually realistic, correct? He was a member of the Camorra.
Giuseppe was not.
He was not.
He was a member of the 'Ndrangheta. So Siniscalchi was from Naples, and Naples is the Camorra. And then you have Calabria, which is the 'Ndrangheta. And they're actually the biggest mafia in the world right now. They're bigger than the Sicilian mafia. So they're competing. They're already from competing villages on other sides of the mountain, but they're also from competing gangs, competing mafias. So there was already bad blood to begin with. They didn't like each other, as soon as they got to America. And then Prohibition starts, and they're both setting themselves up, their little businesses. And, Giuseppe's in West Springfield. Across the Connecticut River, you got Siniscalchi, and he up his bootlegging business. And, it was just a small river that divided our two towns. And they started crossing the river and, stealing customers from each other, and things got heated. And they almost made a deal to do some work together. And Siniscalchi, ripped them off for $750. That's like, $60,000-$70,000 today. So it was a large amount of money he ripped them off for. And, they say that he bumped to him while Siniscalchi was, parked in his limo. He drove around in the back of a limo. He was doing very well as a bootlegger, and they had some words, and Giuseppe felt Siniscalchi was reaching for his gun, and he pulled his gun out and, emptied the revolver into his chest. And that ended that.
How big of news was it that the king of Little Italy was dead?
It was huge. That's why I made writing this book so easy. There's probably 100 newspaper articles that week alone, all through New England. I found stuff all the way out in California was being written about it. It was a huge thing. It was a big murder because it was noontime. It was a couple days before Christmas. It was on Main Street in front of the big store we had. It's kind of like a Macy's. So there's hundreds of people shopping, and this murder happens right in the middle of it. Just before Christmas. It was a big deal, right in broad daylight.
How was Carlo's murder then taken by the community?
Well, the Springfield side wanted revenge. He was loved by his people. It's the South End Springfield. It's 100% Italian, and he was the leader. He was the man in charge. His wife was Pasqualina Siniscalchi, formerly Albano. Her father is known for being the man that brought thousands of Italians to America. He was a padrone. A padrone is a guy who he basically brings people of his own country to work in the factories in America, and he gets paid by the factories to find these people. So he brings them over, he gets paid, and he all makes money from running a travel agency of getting people the tickets to get here. Then he's got places for them to stay. He feeds them. So the Albano family and the Siniscalchi family became one, and when they got married, and it was a huge family, and they just they sought revenge from that point on. It was just a huge thing to kill the king of bootleggers, but also the son-in-law of the father of all the Italians. The man brought everybody to Springfield.
You talked about retaliation. July 3rd of 1922. That exact thing happened against the Parisi's family while Giuseppe was in prison. And the car where the bullets that were fired from belonged to the widow of Carlo, which was Pasqualina. And yes, this is the best line for me in the book. Matter of fact, I have printed this out and I've made a little card of it. This one right here, people. The brother of Giuseppe, John Parisi, says, quote, "Italians don't snitch. We handle problems ourselves," end quote. I absolutely love that. And then he shot Durante Siniscalchi that afternoon, who was the brother of Carlo. So this was going back and forth. This was an all-out mob war from there.
Oh, July 3rd, it just got huge. Like you said, that John Parisi is my grandfather. And he's the one that, I won't, allegedly he's the one that shot Durante, which was Carlos's brother. But what really was big on July 3rd was when Giuseppe's wife, my aunt, was visiting Giuseppe at the jail while he's waiting for trial. And she goes with, my uncles, the Dialeses, they have their attorney, and they had my uncle, Pasquale Marvici. He's only 4 years old at the time. He's along with them for the visit at the jail. So when they leave and they're headed back to West Springfield from the York Street jail, they get followed by a car owned by Pasqualina Siniscalchi, the widow, and driving the car is Theodore Vona, which is Siniscalchi's nephew, and along with another individual, a couple 18-year-old kids basically. And they followed the car, they drove by it, and they with Tommy guns, they just riddled the car with bullets. Then they got to the end of the street, they turned around and came back, and they riddled it up again. And my uncle, at 4 years old at the time, he got shot, at 4 years old, in the arm. And, they were trying to assassinate, my aunt and my uncle and his attorney, right there in front of the jail. They weren't worried about the police back then.
No. What was the magnitude of this court case at the time? Because from reading the book, 2,000 people showed up for the closing arguments.
Yes. Yeah, it was a huge court case. It's the favorite part of my book. I love the whole trial. I wish I could just write a book about the trial alone, but I don't know if anybody would buy it, but the trial is so interesting. Like it said, there was over 2,000 people standing around the courthouse. You didn't have TV back then. So when something happened, you just had to go there yourself, just try to witness it yourself. And they surrounded the courthouse to listen to this trial. The trial was about a week and a half long, and it was a huge trial. And the first day of the trial, one guy tried to bring a gun in, and they caught him with the gun underneath his shirt. So I'm not sure if they're going to try to shoot Giuseppe, but he had a gun under his shirt trying to get into the courtroom, and they got him just in time. But it was a huge trial. It made news all over the country. His attorney was very famous, even at this time. He was the former prosecutor that actually put Siniscalchi in jail years ago, but he just became a defense attorney. But he was one of the most well-spoken speech writers of his era. At the time he was with the Democratic Party, and he was writing the speeches for presidents at the time. And he was introducing presidents. He was doing the speeches for all their rallies. He was just a great speaker. And people just, surrounded the court just to listen to him talk and give closing arguments.
Listeners, go to the show notes. Like I said, I'm going to put a link to the book, Mafia Confessions, King of Bootleggers, Murder. You have to get your hands on this book. The jury deliberated for hours, and at 2:30 a.m., they reached a verdict. They said guilty.
Guilty.
They asked for extreme leniency, although Judge Thayer didn't see it that way, did he, Nick?
No, he didn't see it that way, and he actually took offense to it. You don't tell a judge, guilty, but we want you to sentence him this way. They were looking to give him the electric chair, for premeditated murder, and they found him guilty, but they felt that he should just have time served. He was in jail for 18 months, and they felt it was self-defense. And they wanted the judge to just let him have time served. And he took great offense to this. And he actually gave him the maximum that he could give him for manslaughter at the time, which was 10 years. And he gave him the maximum 10 years. And I really believe it was because the jury requested that he be very lenient with him.
After serving years in prison, 11 jurors signed a petition to the Massachusetts governor requesting a full pardon. Giuseppe served 5.5 years and was released with 6 years probation. That tells me something right there, that the jurors, they still weren't happy with this sentence. So I'm reading this going, wow, I've not read a case to where the jurors come back and go, hey, we want to give this guy a pardon. We got to get this guy out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many years later, they felt that he was, they felt it was unjust that he was given 10 years in prison. And they, years later, they're still trying to, get the governor to pardon him. And, it didn't work the first time. But yeah, they felt, that, he was a very likable guy. They felt that Siniscalchi was a really bad person. Years earlier, two of his buddies, held the arms behind his back and they slashed his face and his neck. Siniscalchi was a mean guy, and Giuseppe came across as a naive young man. He was very likable, and by the end of the trial, they felt that Siniscalchi deserved it.
The 1920s was a period of intense violence, people. Like, a police officer got beat up and the fine was $200. I mean, a lot of money back then, but you beat up a police officer and you get a fine. The bootlegging business was booming in the Massachusetts area, especially in Springfield and in West Springfield. Pasqualina, Carlos's widow, becomes the Queen of Bootlegging. And from what I could find out, Nick, she became pretty vicious, didn't she?
Yeah, she became really vicious. She had a really good partner, though. She had Mike Miranda, Antonio Miranda. I'm sorry. That's the brother of Mike Miranda, who's at the time the consigliere to Vito Genovese.
Mm.
So he's Vito Genovese's right hand man. Antonio comes to Springfield, marries Pasqualina Siniscalchi, and now you get the Genovese crime family of New York City in Springfield helping Pasqualina with her activities of continuing the bootlegging business. So she had some serious muscle at the time.
Yeah, she went through after Carlos 2 husbands, and then she was brutally gunned down. It was an unprecedented organized crime hit on a woman. And I was trying to think of another one, but this seems like probably the first time a woman was gunned down on an organized crime hit.
Yeah, and it was just after it was just after Giuseppe got out of jail, and that unfortunately happened to her. She did a lot of bad things herself, and some people got even.
They said that her husband / companion at the time was Michael Fiore, and he was next to the car when they brutally gunned down Pasqualina and was only hit on the elbow. He himself was suspected of setting up the hit to gain control of the bootlegging business, but I believe that they finally got him cleared on that.
It's my belief, and it's many people's belief that, he was part of that hit, that he wanted to take over the family, and by doing, that he was involved in a hit on his own girlfriend, Pasqualina. And his nephew is Mario Fiore. And for people that don't know who Mario Fiore is, he's a legend. He's right now the oldest living made member of the Genovese crime family. And he just read my book last week. He called me up on New Year's Eve and said, "Nick, I just ordered your book. I can't wait to get it." And I said, Mario, it's, it'll be hard for you to read because, your aunt gets brutally murdered, your uncle, your dad, the book, and, I'm really graphic. So he goes, "Don't worry about it." So, I get a text like 4 days later. "I got the book. I'm opening up right now. I'm going to start reading it right now." So I waited about 4 or 5 days. And I sent a text to him. "Hey, boss, did you love the book?" Nothing.
Oh,
crickets. Oh no, I upset. The guy's a legend. He's been a made man since the 1970s under the Scabelli regime, Big Nose Sam Kafuri, all the way to today. He's still alive. He's still conducting business in La Fiorentino Bakery every morning with his espresso. Every mobster in town goes to him for advice. And I think I pissed him off. But I'm playing golf a couple of days ago and I get a phone call from his son. And, I grew up with his son. And he's like, "Sorry, but, we had an illness in the family and my dad was, predisposed with that. He loves the book." Mm. I'm like, "Oh, that's the greatest thing, because this whole story is about, my family and his family." Mm-hmm. And he was 9 years old and Pasqualina was murdered. And, we'll probably be talking about it, but his uncle gets murdered also a few years later. And he was 9-10 years old at the time. He's going to be 100 years old this year. And he's still an active member of the Genovese crime family.
Well, when his uncle was taken out gangland style,
yes.
Did that then lead to the formation of what we now refer to these days as the Commission?
The Commission was formed in about 1930 in Atlantic City by John Rio. So that hit happened in 1933, just before Prohibition ended. But yeah, things were already organized at the time. So Genovese, his consigliere, Antonio Miranda married Pasqualina, but he died a year later. He got some blood poisoning. He was having a simple callus removed from his foot. They gave him a blood transfusion. It was from a college student, and he got gonorrhea, and he died. And, the Genovese family felt, Springfield was theirs at the time. Because it's Vito Genovese's man that's over there running things, and he dies of gonorrhea, and Michael Fiore slips in all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden Pasqualina gets hit, and he was trying to take over the family from the Genovese family. And next thing you know, he's getting his weekly shave at the barbershop. He goes to every single, week, the same day, same time. And two guys walked in and got in each of them, and they filled them up with lead. And that kind of put an end to that. And the Genovese family still controls Springfield to today.
I want to go back to Giuseppe's attorney that you talked about, Joseph Eli, who was elected Commonwealth first Democratic governor in 14 years. He won 2 terms as the Massachusetts governor, and on March 29th, 1933, Giuseppe was granted a full pardon. I mean, talk about full circle. I mean, comes all the way back around.
Funny how that works, huh?
It is.
The governor of Massachusetts, pardons a convicted killer that was, admitted he did it. He confessed to doing it. He said, I thought he was pulling a gun, and so I shot him in self-defense. So he's an admitted killer in jail for murder, and the governor, as soon as he got elected, pardons him.
Giuseppe, to celebrate, fills out citizenship papers for the second time. But when was the first time he filled them out?
He probably filled them out when he first came to America, but he was denied it. It takes a long time to get your citizenship papers. But yeah, if you notice when he fills out the second set, the governor of Massachusetts is actually with him. And when he's in front of the board to get, they vote whether or not you're going to be a citizen back then. And he's sitting in front of the board, and sitting next to him is the governor of Massachusetts. So they're not going to vote no when the governor is sitting next to you. He was a very influential man, and he had friends in high places, and the governor was one of them.
As I said, listeners, click the link in the show notes. The book is called Mafia Confessions, King of Bootleggers, Murder. It's a 100% true crime story from the personal diary of Giuseppe Joseph Parisi. Nick, what else do you want to tell my listeners about this story or about the book?
I was thinking this morning, actually, and I never thought about this for the last year when I was writing the book, but if Giuseppe did not kill Carlo Siniscalchi on that day, I don't think the Genovese crime family would have ever moved into Springfield. Now, the Genovese crime family is huge in Springfield, the faction. They've been active since about 1925, all the way till today. If Giuseppe didn't kill Carlo Siniscalchi, then his widow would not have married the consigliare's brother of Vito Genovese. So I don't think the Genovese crime family would be there today. I think this kicked off a series of events that led to today's current mafia.
It's funny, they say everything happens for a reason, but even a murder happened for a reason.
Exactly.
Nick, thanks so much for taking some time, and first of all, turning me on to the book and coming on the show and talking about it.
Oh, I appreciate it. You're going to love my next book. I'm already writing the second book, and it continues on with the Genovese crime family. And it's going to be about the current bosses of Springfield. It's going to be about the mob during the 80s and the 90s. Arolata, who flipped against, he was a Genovese capo. He killed the head of the mob, Al Bruno, in Springfield. He becomes mob boss. They kill a bunch of people. Then he gets fingered, and he flips on 47 members of the Genovese crime family, puts them all in prison. Now, 2 of the people he put in prison that helped with the mob hit with Al Bruno, which will be part of this book, is Freddie Gius. Freddie Gius was one of my best friends in high school. Now, Freddie Gius goes to prison. While he's in prison, they put him in the cell with Whitey Bulger. And so in 2 months, he's already admitted to doing it, but my buddy from high school was the one who killed Whitey Bulger in prison. And as soon as he gets out of solitary confinement, I'll start talking with him. But I'm actually talking to all the current members of the Mafia today, and we're doing a book on the Springfield mob. And it's completely opposite of what people think have been going on. The newspapers have it totally wrong of what they're reporting in Springfield right now with the Genovese crime family. And I'm talking to former members, current members, and I'm talking to the informant that flipped on everybody. And this book is going to be, this should be a huge revelation, a huge book on what's going on in the Mafia today with the type of people I'm talking to.
I'm definitely reading that one when it comes out.
Okay, great. That's one sale. Thank you.
Yes, you got one sale for sure. I'm sure you'll get a whole bunch more. But listeners, as an inspirational speaker that I do on this side, my story will inspire you to inspire others. My story of beating cancer against the odds will get you on the path to change your life and become a better version of yourself. Click the link in the show notes or go to TommyKennelly.com. That's TommyKennelly.com. That's going to do it for this episode of Before the Lights. Until next time, everybody, salute a chin chin.